All right, so that next team would be the San Antonio Spurs. Got to be one of the younger teams that people are the most excited about, namely just because of one single player that they drafted with the number one pick, and the excitement around watching him. Um, but San Antonio did make a couple of other little minor moves around the edges.
Yeah,
They kind of just like shuffled the back end of their roster. They
they
brought
collected
in,
a couple of contracts
yeah,
for in exchange for draft assets. Because
yeah,
that's what you do
yeah.
with cap space, I guess, unless you're the Rockets. So,
And they still do have a lot of cap space, and they still are positioned as like a dumping ground for people's unwanted. Like they clearly, I think I heard something along the lines of like they wanted to chase Austin Reeves and decided against it for the explicit purpose of keeping their cap space open. So that's
okay,
something to keep an
I
eye on.
I'm gonna have to do my Austin Reeves rant. But
All right.
let's go over their transactions this offseason first.
Okay.
So obviously Victor Wembanyama. I mean, it was really cool seeing the San Antonio international big man tradition continue.
Mm-hmm.
Or just generational talent, big man. I guess David
Yeah.
Robinson wasn't an international player, but anyway, the big man tradition is continuing in San Antonio, which is great. They picked up Reggie Bullock and Chetty Osman in salary movement acquisitions, where they got
Mm-hmm.
a pick swap, I believe, not an actual pick, but a pick swap from Dallas in 2030 for Bullock, and they got a second round pick for Osman and campaign. Yeah, so that's three salary dumps that the Spurs were involved in.
Active.
And they re signed Julian Champagny. He was on a two-way with them last year, and they signed him to a real contract. So I guess
Yep.
they liked what they saw with at least one of the Champagnes.
Yeah. Did they bring in Charles Bassey this offseason or at the end of the last season?
No, the 76ers cut him.
Yeah.
I still am trying to figure out exactly why they decided to do that.
Oh, he
Um,
played 35 games with them last year.
yeah, and then they picked him up off of waivers.
Yeah.
Charles Bassey is good, and I
Yeah.
remember this instance a couple seasons ago in the playoffs where people are like, you know, the 76ers just don't have a backup center when Embiid's not in the game that's functional. It's like Charles Bassey's right there. I don't think he even got any playing time. But
Yeah. Then there's
anyway,
Paul Reed.
yeah, and Paul Reed's there now. But anyway, with the Spurs, oh yeah, and they re-signed Trey Jones.
Yep.
Perfectly solid backup point guard, fill-in starter type of guy.
He's the
Kind of
starter there this year.
kind of in the mold of like, let's say, a Tyus Jones.
I don't see any similarities, but I'll trust you on that one.
Yeah,
They also brought in a young guy that we both liked in CD Sissoko.
yeah,
Um,
oh,
you
that's
know,
true.
he might have a chance at minutes at the 3 of the 4 positions. They've got a lot of like I don't really know what their wing rotation looks like. They've got a bunch of players who are sort of ambiguously sized position wise. I'm not really sure if they're a 2-3-4. I'm thinking Devin Vassell, Malachi Branham, Keldon Johnston,
Mhm.
Jeremy Sohan. Like that's a lot of guys that I'm just like I'm not sure what your ideal NBA position is right now. But I've got their starting lineup projected right now as Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama. Yama.
You don't believe the rumors of Victor Wembanyama playing the four?
Next to like Zach Collins.
Well, just to like save his body. I don't know.
I don't really understand. That gets said a lot about a lot of players. Have said about Anthony Davis too. I'm not really sure I understand the.
It doesn't make any sense,
Yeah,
basketball wise. It's a terrible idea, but
Victor Wembanyama. Victor, you're gonna want to keep him close to the hoop to block shots. Like I don't like. What does playing him at the 4 mean? Like that he's going to be like
I
chasing
mean, the
around.
old adage is that, oh, like you're down in the paint, you're banging bodies for rebounds. Like I don't know. I mean, that's the game has changed a lot. Centers spend a lot of time outside of the paint anyway these days. So
I do think they're going to want to put some like strength around him, but I think Jeremy Sohan and Keldon Johnson like already represent that. Like
yeah,
I don't see a 5 on this roster that's going to spare Victor. Like, Zach Collins is not really that type of player. They've got Kem Birch on the roster, but I can't picture him like starting. Like the aforementioned Charles Bassey. Like I don't know. Like Greg Popovich will do something cool there, but
Mhm.
I'm going to consider Victor Wembanyama the 5 when he's playing with any of the players that we just mentioned, unless it was like even Kem Birch is not very big, so I just don't see the personnel for it. So
I
I
sure
wouldn't
hope
be
so
that.
because Sohan's the future. He
Yeah,
needs to start. So
I also love the fit between those two. Like
yeah,
a shooting giant lanky shot blocker next to like
a super physical athlete who just has endless energy.
yeah, who can't really shoot but can dribble and play make, who
Yeah.
wants to like post up a bit but would need like the spacing and the matchup. So just putting him next to Victor, I just feel like their strengths and weaknesses are just so seamless. I'm most excited about um, the pairing of those two players long term of anything on the San Antonio Spurs roster. And I think Devin Vassell is also a very good fit, especially if he can grow even more as a movement shooter. To me, those three are currently the San Antonio's core. We'll see if like Keldon Johnson can bounce back or if Malachi Branham can take another step forward. But I just see a lot of those other players as like more potentially replaceable down the line, where I'm most excited about that trio.
Yeah. No, I like the fit with Sohan and Wembanyama as well. Teams are going to panic when Wembanyama gets the ball down in the paint because like he's so big, especially if he's on a mismatch, and his ball skills around the rim are excellent. But if they collapse on him, Sohan's going to dash to the basket. He's going to get an offensive rebound or he's going to receive a dump off pass.
Yeah.
He's not going to let those opportunities slip when there's an opportunity to cause chaos.
Yeah, I also think with Victor because of like how skinny he is, you're going to want to put him in a whole bunch of offensive advantageous situations where he's able to like surprise defenses. If you put the ball like in his hands and rotate around them, I think that's going to be a little bit more difficult of an ask for him earlier in his career. But if
Yeah.
you're getting him in situations where he's able to like roll or pop, like
Mhm.
be spacing the floor sometimes, but also be sneaking into gaps where because he doesn't need much of a gap at that size, right? Like Victor getting near the hoop without full defensive attention might just be a dunk. What young guys, besides the three that I just mentioned, are the most exciting or least exciting to you in San Antonio?
Well, I mean, with some of these guys, we just haven't really seen a whole lot from them. Like, Blake Wesley barely played his rookie year. I'm not really sure what to expect from him. Champagny, played more and more as the season went on, but most of it was kind of late in the year where teams weren't taking San Antonio all that seriously.
Yeah.
Um, so, I just don't necessarily know what to expect. Vassell's coming off a major injury that derailed most of the season last year. I'm forgetting exactly what the injury was, but he was looking great early in the season before he got hurt. And then Keldon Johnson had a very disappointing season, but I think a lot of that was just there wasn't a ton of playmaking on the Spurs roster. Vassell was out, which really hurt their spacing. He didn't have a whole lot of help, but
There's still a pretty big lack of playmaking on that roster unless like Trey Jones and Jeremy Sohan have the ball in their hands like a little bit more. Um, those are their only two sort of like capable playmakers. So we'll see how they organize the offense around that. I mean, yeah, Keldon Johnson, how old is he? He's
still early
24,
20s, 23, 24.
not yet 24. So,
Yeah.
um, like him falling off him falling, taking a step back as a 3 point shooter, I don't think is the end of the world at that age. If he has a
I
good
mean,
shooting season, he'll be right back on track.
he's a guy who should ideally be like a third option who was
Yeah,
forced into being the team's first option. So
yeah, yeah.
it's the
Um,
classic playing over your head.
Yeah, and I think Victor could be really good for him as well, especially if Victor can shoot the ball well this year and be any kind of like a spacer. And because Keldon Johnson, I think, is underrated with like a little like the rim pressure he can bring at his size. Like he can be a big handful on the inside, and I think that's a like way that San Antonio should be able to play. My big thing with Victor is just like, what if he's not actually that good of a shooter in his rookie season? Like, I don't actually love the touch. I know that everyone has watched footage of him hitting incredible difficult looking shots, and he definitely did that. But he wasn't actually a good shooter in this junior league in France.
Yeah.
Um, and while the form is okay, like I don't think he actually has naturally great touch. Like I think he's only okay in that regard. So
Hmm.
I think Victor Wembanyama could have a very disappointing offensive season based on the expectations of fans.
Mhm.
I think people who have seen him more know that he's more of a defensive prospect than an offensive prospect anyways.
Yeah.
A lot of potential in the offensive end, but I'm not sure if there's a whole lot of um, NBA readiness to those parts of his game. I think if he has success on offense in his rookie season, it'll be more due to his sort of like size and
Yeah.
ability, just like size and mobility and ability to just surprise people with not being not needing much of a window to just like get a good look at the rim. But I think if people think he's going to spend the whole season efficiently, like taking guys off the dribble into pull ups, I think that could be a bit disappointing for fans.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely a lot more excited about his defensive potential. A lot of his eye-popping highlights from like summer league and even from last season include more of the like, oh my gosh, his wingspan is so insane. His
Yeah.
ability to like react and recover to what the offense is doing is so insane. I was
And
like,
block
yeah,
three
okay,
pointers.
he hit a few jump shots. I mean, he's really tall. I mean, these are all basically uncontested shots.
Yeah.
Um, so whatever. Anyway, we'll end off here just with my brief Austin Reeves rant. It's been driving
Okay.
me absolutely nuts all season. Everyone and their brother has to bring up whenever we talk about the Spurs or the Lakers that the Spurs had $10 billion in cap space and they could have offered all of that to Austin Reeves, and the Lakers would have had to match, and it would have screwed over the Lakers, and this benefits the Spurs, emotionally, I guess. But I mean, the one thing that I have not heard mentioned very often is, when you sign a guy to a massive offer sheet, it locks up that cap room until the offer sheet is matched. And you don't necessarily want to go into free agency using all of your cap space on a guy that you probably are not going to receive. He's not going to sign with you anyway. Um, you're basically just locking up your cap space to screw over one out of your 29 opponents instead of actually doing anything to improve your own team. Um, and I don't think that's a very smart way to conduct team building. I mean, I don't like the Lakers. I think it would be awesome to, you know, have them have to pay twice as much for Austin Reeves and reduce their flexibility in the long run. But that's not a very intelligent way for the Spurs to conduct business as an operation.
Well, the Spurs agreed with you and did not go that path and instead quickly moved into a series of smaller moves that improved their sort of like flexibility and assets going
Yeah,
forward.
you got to worry about your own organization. Like you're not competing against the Lakers, you're competing against everyone. So
Yeah. Now they did shorten that window for the restricted free agency. Like it's no longer. It used to be like it was like you got a full like 2 weeks or 11
yeah, you had to
days.
wait.
11.
Like you were just opting out of free agency if
Yeah.
you signed an offer sheet. But
Yeah. So it's kind of like I think you do that move later in the summer if you have that option. But yeah, you don't open it up with a unless you really feel like you could get him. And I'm sure the Spurs did their intel and realized that or understood the Lakers would match and decided there's not much of a point to that. Though I mean, we're not talking too much about the Lakers in this podcast. I'm sure their fans are excited that they're not being mentioned
not
among
in
the
the
bottom
bottom.
five teams. But I mean, it was impressive that they got Austin Reeves back at the number that they did, considering that teams like San Antonio were interested in signing him to a larger offer sheet. So
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to our next team.